Chapter 3. Teddy Enters Politics. Teddy entered Harvard University in 1876. He was a bundle of energy. He worked and played hard. He talked all the time, and he loved books. He could read very fast, and he had an amazing memory. Years later, he could repeat things he'd read word for word. Teddy planned to be a scientist, but two things happened that would change his life forever. During Teddy's second year at school, his father died suddenly. It was a shock. Teddy's friends and family worried about him. They were afraid he would never get over his sadness. But Teddy was a man of action. He worked harder than ever to help take his mind off of his troubles. Early in his third year at Harvard, joy came back into his life. He fell in love with a young woman named Alice Lee. Teddy and Alice planned to get married. Alice made it clear that she did not want Teddy to become a scientist. She didn't like the idea of cutting up animals or the smell of the chemicals he used. Teddy wanted to please Alice. He also wanted to honor his father. He could do that by working to make the world a better place. Over here, this is a picture, and the caption says, "Welcome to Harvard." Harvard University is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Teddy was happy there. And up here at this picture, the caption says, "Ready to run." Teddy ran track in college. Here he is in his running gear. And if he were famous, that would bring honor to the family name. He knew what he should do with his life. Instead of science, he would go into politics. Here is a caption in this picture. It says, "Teddy graduated from Harvard University, where he studied science." Teddy the lawmaker. By November of 1881, Teddy was a married man. He was also an elected official. Teddy ran as a Republican candidate for the New York State Assembly, the lawmaking body of the state. Teddy was different from most of the others in the assembly. He stood out for several reasons. There was the way that he looked. Teddy had his hair parted down the middle, and he wore an eyeglass that clipped to his nose and hung from a chain. He liked fancy clothes. Teddy's background was different too. His family was wealthy. He had traveled around the U.S. and even to Egypt, and he had a university education. Most people in politics at the time did not come from rich families. They did not have college degrees. So Teddy seemed out of place in the state government. The other lawmakers soon found that Teddy was a hard worker. He worked to pass laws about who should get government jobs. Usually, politicians would give jobs to people who helped get them elected. Teddy believed people should work in government only if they were good at their jobs. The public liked Teddy. When he ran for office again in 1883, he got most of the votes. Everything was going very well for the young lawmaker. Then in early 1884, tragedy struck. And the caption of this picture says, "Teddy, standing on the right here, was proud of this photo taken with other lawmakers. He thought people should get government jobs based on their brains and not who they knew." Here's a caption here pointing to this picture, and it says, "Alice Roosevelt is seated next to Teddy." She's right here. The woman on the right is Alice's cousin. Teddy and Alice had been expecting a baby. On February 12th, Alice Roosevelt had a little girl. The baby was named Alice after her mother. Teddy and his wife were thrilled. The baby was healthy, but Teddy's wife became ill. At the time, Teddy's mother, Mitty, was also very sick. On February 14, Mitty died. A few hours later, in the same house, Teddy's wife died too. On the same terrible day, Teddy lost his mother and his wife. Teddy felt his world had ended. He didn't know what to do. He turned to his sister Anna and asked her to take care of the new baby. Anna thought Teddy should build a home for his daughter. So right here is a picture, and it says, Sagamore Hill is in Oyster Bay, New York. Teddy loved the house and spent much of his time there. Teddy owned a piece of land in New York on Long Island. He decided to build a large house there. He called his new home Sagamore Hill. Sagamore was the name of a Native American chief. The chief had used the hill as a meeting place in the 1600s. Teddy finished his term in the New York State Assembly. When he had to get away, he headed west, leaving Alice at home with Anna. Teddy had always loved the outdoors. Being active and busy in the outdoors would help the young widower forget his deep sadness. Chapter 4, Cowboy on the Range. Teddy moved to what is now North Dakota. The local people thought he was a pretty odd character. He talked like an Easterner. He seemed too small for the rugged Western life. And sometimes he wore glasses. That was very unusual for a cowboy. Everyone thought Teddy would find life too hard out west. But people would soon change their minds. Teddy rode out on the trail with a guide to hunt buffalo. The weather was cold and rainy. They couldn't find any buffalo, but Teddy never complained. In fact, he was having a wonderful time. It took 2 weeks for Teddy to find a buffalo. After he shot it, he did a little dance around it. He sent the animal's head back east. He wanted to have it stuffed to hang on his wall. Here is a picture, and it says, Teddy proudly poses in his Western gear. He even took off his glasses for the photo. A conservationist is born. Teddy loved being in the wild country. No matter how tired, wet, or hungry he got, he stayed in a good mood. Teddy loved nature. He thought it was beautiful and amazing, and he studied every new plant or animal to see what he could learn. Teddy said a hunter should be a lover of nature as well of sport, or he will miss half of the pleasure of being in the woods. He realized that nature must be protected or it will disappear. People will tear it down or spoil it. People who try to protect nature are conservationists. One day, Teddy would become the greatest conservationist president in history. Teddy lived in the West for 2 years. When he headed back east, he was a changed man. He was tough and healthy. He would go back to politics, but his life in the West would always be part of him. Teddy went home to Sagamore Hill. Now he could get to know his little daughter, Alice. Here is a picture of Teddy on the trail. Teddy may have been the happiest in the great outdoors. He's shown here with his horse, Manitou. He would also get to know an old friend again. Her name was Edith Caro. Edith and Teddy had known each other as children. They met again after the death of Teddy's wife. Teddy and Edith got married at the end of 1886. Mystery Place. Clue 1. Can you find this mountain? You can find this mountain in Keystone, South Dakota. Clue 2. The 4 U.S. presidents carved into the mountain represent the first 150 years of U.S. history. They are George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. Each face is 60 feet tall. Clue 3. The sculptor Gutzon Borglum began drilling into the 5,725-foot mountain in 1927. It took 14 years to finish. Can you name this mountain? The answer is Mount Rushmore. Here's a picture. Family ties. Teddy and Edith posed with their children at Sagamore Hill in 1903. From left to right, Quentin, Dad, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., Archie and Alice, Kermit, Mom, and Ethel. The couple lived at Sagamore Hill with Teddy's daughter Alice. Over the years, Edith and Teddy had 5 more children: Theodore, Kermit, Ethel, Archibald, and Quentin. Teddy spent much of his time writing. He had written part of his first book while he was still in college. Throughout his life, he continued to write about history, nature, politics, and his own life. He wrote more than 45 books. He could have been a writer and nothing else. But that was not enough for Teddy. He had too much energy for just one career. He needed much more to do to keep him busy and happy. A new job. Teddy became a police commissioner in New York City. At the same time, some of the police in New York were not honest. Some slept on the job instead of keeping the streets safe. Some would take money from criminals. In return, the police promised not to arrest the lawbreakers. Teddy walked through the streets late at night. He caught many police officers breaking the law. He made sure that anyone not doing his job would get in trouble. All his life, Teddy had believed that the problems of the poor were their own fault, but spending time in poor areas of New York City helped change his mind. Now he felt that the poor could not improve their lives if they were not paid fairly for their work. It made Teddy angry to see bosses get rich off the labor of the poor. It was a lesson that he would always remember and try to do something about later in his life. This picture, the caption says, "As head of the New York City Police, Teddy made the city a safer place." Chapter 5, Teddy and the Rough Riders. In 1897, Teddy was named Assistant Secretary of the Navy by President William McKinley. At about the time, Teddy started brewing in Cuba, a small island in the Atlantic Ocean, 90 miles from Florida. In the 1890s, Spain was in control of Cuba. Teddy thought Spain should leave the island. He wanted the U.S. to be the only powerful nation in this part of the world. Most Cubans wanted Spain to leave, too. Some Cubans joined together to try to kick Spain out. Here in this caption, it says Teddy was an expert horseback rider. His skills would come in handy. Over here in this picture, in 1898, Teddy got ready to head for Cuba. There, he led the Rough Riders. President McKinley tried to avoid war, but Teddy was eager for it. Why? He thought war would make Americans strong. He probably had another reason, too. Teddy felt bad that his father had not fought in the Civil War. He wanted to make up for that fact and honor his family, and he didn't want to miss out on what he thought would be a great adventure. Remember the Maine. Right here, this picture says the battleship Maine blew up on February 15, 1898. President McKinley sent a battleship, the Maine, to Cuba. Teddy thought it was a bully thing to do. Bully was Teddy's word for excellent. On the night of February 15th, 1898, the Maine exploded and 266 men were killed. No one knew the cause of the explosion, but many blamed Spain. Some newspapers said the US should go to war. They made up stories about the Spanish attack. They knew that the war would sell a lot of papers. Experts now believe that the explosion was an accident. Spain had nothing to do with it. Teddy was thrilled. He believed Spain had attacked the US, and now the US could defend its honor. Teddy formed a volunteer army of 1,000 men, and they were nicknamed Roosevelt's Rough Riders. The men fought at a place called San Juan Hill. Many soldiers were seriously wounded, and 89 died. Teddy was proud of his men, and he was glad the U.S. won the battle. He said it was the great day of my life. This caption says, Rough Riders proudly pose at the top of San Juan Hill after the battle. The U.S. won the Spanish-American War.